I always knew I wanted to own something, but I had no idea what the challenges as well as the amount of work. I've never worked as hard as I do right now owning my own business. It's more fulfillment than anything that I've ever done, but it's definitely the hardest work.
This is Terri Evans.
My name is Terri Evans. I own Ryland Smokehouse LLP, which we're known as Windy City Ribs and Whiskey, located in the South Loop of Chicago. I got into it because someone was looking at selling, and I said, this could be a good opportunity for me to build generational wealth for my son. I have a 7-year-old, and I wanted to do something that I could control the wealth component of. And so the opportunity presented itself to purchase this restaurant. And my grandfather actually sold whiskey as a freed slave. So the connection of coming back full circle 3 generations later, where he, in 1865, took his 40 acres, turned it into 3,600 acres, and then also sold whiskey to get his family out of poverty and to create, generational wealth, I think has kind of this full circle moment for me to recognize of the shoulders that I stand on, and why when we talk about tip wage and its connection back to slavery, why that having that vocal component is so important, to be able to have that conversation and then have the platform to be able to do it.
In July of 2020, the Restaurant Opportunity Center United released a report called The Great Service Divide. The report said something that I've heard echoed for a long time, that the restaurant industry is very diverse. But the questions raised in the report were more about the equity in restaurants. It was shown through ROC United's research that though 46% of restaurant folks are people of color, front of house versus back of house is highly segregated by race, with higher wage jobs going to white folks and people of color being relegated to lower wage jobs in the back. So the pandemic has brought about a reckoning. The diversity, equity, and inclusion conversation is nothing new by any means. But the protests of 2020 and 2021 sparked a resurgence of popular discourse. Diversity, equity, inclusion, intersectionality, anti-racism. There's some corporate training around these topics for bigger companies, but not so much in hospitality. You're listening to Copper and Heat, the podcast exploring the unspoken rules and traditions of restaurants. I'm Katie Osuna. This is Pre-Shift, our 3rd season, getting you tips, tools, and resources to navigate the challenges of working in hospitality. In this Pre-Shift, we're talking about DEIA, Diversity, Equity, Inclusion, and Access.
I call it DEIA, so Diversity, Equity, Inclusion, Access.
This is Dr. Erinn Tucker.
My name is Dr. Erinn Tucker. I am the faculty director and associate professor of the practice for the Global Hospitality Leadership Program at Georgetown University School of Continuing Studies. So that was a really long title. And I'm also the co-founder of DMV, DC, Maryland, Virginia Black Restaurant Week.
Dr. Tucker has worked in hospitality in various forms for a long time, but has been teaching for the last several years. And one of the topics that she teaches a lot on is DEIA. The first letter in the acronym, diversity, is where everyone starts when it comes to DEIA work. Unfortunately, it's also where a lot of people stop. So what does diversity mean?
So I always say diversity is more like demographic information, race, gender, socioeconomic, everything that you can check mark.
Here's Terri Evans again.
Just because I have a diverse staff doesn't mean that they treat each other with the same level of respect as they should.
I was connected to Terri by Jeannie Chen, the director of Ray's High Roads Restaurants, an offshoot of the One Fair Wage organization. Ray's is a national network of restaurants that are working toward gender and racial equity within the restaurant industry. Ray's provides an equity training that Terri is a part of.
It's set up in modules, and we have a trainer that comes in and teaches us things that every person that's in a leadership role should have when they're leading people. And it's about having the ability for people to understand what equity and diversity looks like, and how to ensure that you are leading a team that not only understands it, but executes it in regards to how they treat their customers, but more importantly for me, my biggest takeaway is how they treat each other.
Having a diverse staff is really important to build equity in the restaurant industry overall. So Terri has put different policies and programs in place to do that.
I think for me, as you know, from where I stand and having the platform to be able to hire, I think it's about how you hire. Are you conscious about what your hiring decision says about you and about your staff that are trying to grow and trying to grow into various roles? But also, do they also own the same mindset as you as far as how they see equity and diversity as well? You know, it's very easy to find non-minority female managers in the industry. It's harder to find a Black female manager to come in and be responsible for managing the bar side as well as the restaurant side. But I think you have to search and find those examples so that people can see themselves also in those roles and grow to be in those roles. And so, you know, you have to provide a true example of understanding within your organization that you respect everybody's role and what they bring to the table, and allowing them to have that voice no matter what.
Which brings us to the next letter in the acronym, E, for equity.
Equity is exceptionally hard. It requires that one is really committed to strategic priorities and resources and respect and civility. It's in your actions. Equity, you can't checkmark like diversity. Equity is fairness. Equality is equal portions. So when I talk about equality, it's more or less like if you're sitting down at a table with 2 adults, 1 teenager, and 1 baby, equality would be every single person would get the exact same piece of that pie. When in reality that one adult might have one sort of set of conditions that they might not need as much pie as the other adult. The teenager might not need as large of a slice, or the teenager might need a bigger slice because they're growing and excelling. They might be athletes or whatever, but the baby does not necessarily get a piece of that pie equally because they're just not built for that. So equity is about fairness and understanding transparency and proportionality, while equality is more or less about take everybody having a very much an equal piece and an equal start, when in reality, nobody has an equal start. There's no such thing as that because people are starting and receiving resources at different points in time.
I think understanding how critical it is and important it is to provide benchmarks and expectations with respect to how people communicate with each other. I think that communication piece is such a critical component. And so you don't think that there's going to be this whole section on communication within the diversity and equity training. But what I found was when I started to do my own assessments and surveys after coming out of that class is that I recognized that people were taking advantage of other people within their sector because they felt like they could for whatever reason. Maybe it's because that person is older and they felt like they could take, they could push some of their work onto someone else, or they knew that that person may not necessarily be more vocal or speak up for themselves. And so finding these blind spots within your organization and then calling it out, and then how are you being an example to your other counterparts, even at the same level? So equity comes in all forms.
Terri was able to discover this inequity in her restaurants by having monthly check-ins to check in with her team and conducting surveys to understand what each member of her team was going through, which speaks to the last 2 letters of the acronym, I for inclusion and A for access.
When we talk about access, most of the time, access is really talked about in giving equitable, not equal, access to everyone along their abilities and experiences. For some reason, this definition is used a lot for like physical, like having accessible buildings. But it's not just that. It's much, much deeper. It's really about kind of how do we represent connectedness. So for example, in the workplace, when we're talking about access in a society, are you setting up your program? Are you setting up your policy? Are you setting up your company in a way that's at least accessible to all? It doesn't mean that everybody necessarily wants it or will receive it, but they can at least reach to get it. So if you're in like a company, if you have, let's say there's an opportunity to be part of a leadership program, if you only send it through email, then the people that are just more email accessible will only be the ones that'll see that particular opportunity. But if you send it through, your listserv, you put it on the internal website, you send it through social media, maybe some sort of internal social media, you chat it, then you're making access much broader for more people to be able to take advantage of that opportunity. So you have to get that access. And then if you are included in the conversation, or as they say, be invited, once you are actually in that room, you have to participate in that room. And so inclusion is a lot about, you're there, but you also have to, and there needs to be a willingness to also hear something differently.
Absolutely. And inclusion and access, everybody has to be given an opportunity. I think the other puzzle piece that I didn't mention is understanding what people have to do before they get to work. What's their home situation like? So really trying to understand who we are hiring, the mindset of the person that we're hiring, and then going the extra mile. I have conversations because I have a language barrier, and I'm trying to do better personally, but as far as learning and personal training, but I have to have conversations with one of my employees with their kids, because there's this language barrier that I want to make sure he understands and how important his voice is to me, and changes that we need to make within the organization. So, it's not unusual for once a week for me to be having a conversation with his son, so that he can then have this conversation in depth in a private setting versus me having to do the translation at work. So we talk when he's at home and he's comfortable, he's with his family, and we can have this heart-to-heart conversation of what I need to be doing and improving upon, because no one acts for their circumstances. And so you've got to be able to meet people where they are and not make them feel uncomfortable because there is a communication barrier that prevents them from being able to voice their concerns.
We spend more time on the logistics and operations of what we do, and not focusing on the fact that our employees are in this. Some of them are in our industry. We write off two types of employees. Either they're in this job temporarily because it's an in-between spot, or they want to make this a career. The reality is that we need to look at all employees the same. And with that is they are in our space. We need to get to know what their skill sets are, not just asking them when they can work, when they can't work. Have you worked with other people before? But no, it's everybody, back of the house, front of the house, operations, housekeeping, convention services. Bring to your job so many more gifts and talents. Okay, so for some reason, I was walking through the restaurant and I started hearing like a lot of Spanish speaking, just Spanish being spoken, all right? And I remember just one day, I was like, there's a lot of Spanish being spoken. And so I remember going into our office. I shared the office with another sales manager. And I said, we don't book any like Hispanic, Latino, now it will be Latinx events. Have you noticed that? And so I said, because we have a significant amount of Spanish speaking customers, but apparently it's not getting back here to us. And so she was just kind of like, well, I never really, thought about it and stuff. And so I said, okay, I'm going to approach this. So I reached out and connected with the Hispanic Chamber of Commerce. And so all of a sudden we started getting these bookings. One event that I was booking, it was a Girl Scout troop. And so they actually, booking, requested a Spanish speaking server. And I was like, well, absolutely. And so when I was talking to the AGM, he said, I checked everybody who's working today. He's like, and there's nobody that really speaks Spanish comfortably enough. And so I said, okay. So every morning I would go into the kitchen and I would always say, hola, ¿cómo está usted? I was just doing that, period. That was just my way of greeting everybody in the morning. And so I got into this conversation with the dishwasher, and he was saying, and I said, I was just kind of telling him the situation, and he says, I can maybe help you. And I said, well, tell me about yourself. And he told me that back in Mexico, he actually worked in customer service. And I was like, what? He's like, yeah. He's like, I would do that. And he says, it's just that I came here, to America because, I just wanted a better opportunity with better pay so I could send, money back to my family. And so I went to my GM and I said, listen, I said, we got someone that actually is working that day who's Spanish speaking, and he's got a background in customer service. I said, why don't we put him on this party? And my GM, at the time was like, okay, he says, well, go and make sure to talk to the kitchen manager. Talk to the kitchen manager first, but if it's cool with the kitchen manager, it's cool with me. So I went to talk to the kitchen manager was like, okay, it's cool. It's always slow at this time, blah, blah, blah. And he went, I said, just make sure you put on, your uniform for it. He went and rocked out. He rocked out. And after it was over, I said, I was in a manager's meeting. I said, we don't know our staff. We know the jobs that they do, but we don't know like the skill set that they have. That is something that we need to do to be able to uplift our industry, especially now. We will not be going back to the way things used to be with COVID-19. COVID-19 has released the lid on the problems that we already pretty much have. The businesses that are going to survive this particular industry and come out on the other side are the ones that are going to have to understand it's going to be hospitality. It's not just going to be working at a restaurant, working at a hotel and running operations. It's going to be how we treat each other, not just the customer, but how employees are treating each other. It's going to be recognizing that this is a skill that you are getting for whatever you think of just washing dishes. It's not just about underpaying. You are getting an exceptionally skilled person that you didn't even know that could help bring up and provide something that your unit, your restaurant, or your whatever your job is, could be stronger and could be more competitive if we engage with our employees better and not just look at them as a job.
The most important thing is me as a African American female that felt like I, lived in a world where diversity and understanding diversity and inclusion and equity was something that I had to live and experience personally. I think within this industry, you have no idea the amount of work that still needs to be done as it relates to diversity, equity, and inclusion. And it's a totally different blueprint, I think, than any other industry. And it is how you peel back the onion with regards to how people are treated at every single level within your organization. And so really get into the weeds and open your ears to hearing the conversations. And just because you think you're doing well by having a diverse staff, take it from me that there is a ton of work that still needs to be done, and be open to making those changes, because it's important and it's critical, and is our responsibility to ensure that we're providing a safe and equitable place for people to work, where they come and they feel empowered to rise and improve, and not feel as though they're coming in to get beat up, or not literally, but beat up from a mindset standpoint on a daily basis. So I just would challenge everyone to take the time out to challenge themselves to understanding how important this work is.
This is just barely scratching the surface, the very 101 level of educating yourself on DEIA. So head over to our Instagram page and follow us. We'll be doing an IG Live with Jenny Dorsey in the next couple weeks to answer some of your questions. Dr. Tucker and Terri are doing some really awesome work, so please check them out.
You can find us at windycityribs.net or on Instagram at Windy City Ribs and Whiskey.
You can find me on Twitter at Erinn, Erinn Tucker, Tucker, all one word. You can connect with me also on LinkedIn. You can find DMV Black Restaurant Week at DMVBRW. You can find us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at DMVBRW, or you can reach out to us. We have a website, dmvbrw.com.
You can also check out Ray's High Road Restaurants at raysrestaurants.org. We'll link in the show notes. We're also linking to a bunch more resources about intersectionality and DEIA. So check out the show notes and our website, copperandheat.com, so you can dig in a little more. If you haven't already done it, hit the subscribe button in your podcast app. Then you can keep up with all of our new episode releases throughout this season. Even better, please share this with a friend. Pre-Shift, the third season of Copper and Heat, is produced by me, Katie Osuna. Our story editor is Rachel Palmer. Our sound engineer and composer is Ricardo Osuna. Thanks for listening!